wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to work, cause my...
Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be covering the TCL QM8. I'm going to be talking about the pros and some of the cons. I'm also going to be doing the comparison on the Sony X95K, which I know a lot of people is going to have some comments a little bit later asking why am I doing the comparison on the Sony X95K. Well, if you don't know, I no longer have the Sony Bravia 9, so I want to go ahead and do that comparison on the X95K just because I want to see how the QM8 will hold up when it comes to the shadow detail and looking at the black levels. You would be surprised about this comparison video, so hopefully everyone will enjoy. But before I go ahead and start the video, if you could do me a favor by hitting that like button and that subscribe button, I greatly appreciate it. Without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in.
Let's talk about what the TCL QM8 does really well, starting with the HDR performance. The HDR impact is honestly incredible. The brightness this TV delivers is off the charts, and when you're watching content with intense highlight, those specular details absolutely leaps off the screen. Think about the sunlight glistening off the metal or a bright explosion in the action scene. It all handles with finesse, giving you that wow factor while you're looking at a premium 4K TV. Now, the colors on the QM8 are pretty good. They're vibrant, they pop, they have a nice depth to them while feeling oversaturated. Whether it's the rich red or subtle blue, everything looks pretty decent, which makes for a very immersive viewing experience. And one of the biggest wins here is the black levels. For an LED TV, the black levels are pretty impressive, especially considering how minimal the blooming is. Blooming is when bright objects on a dark background starts to bleed light into the surrounding areas, and that's something that the QM8 controls very well. You got rich, deep blacks with very little blooming, making dark scenes feel more realistic and more immersive.
Now looking at this, and even though it's a budget TV, the TCL QM8, it achieves a really good contrast. It gives that picture a lot of depth, which I'm really shocked about. And overall, the image feels crisp and detailed, especially when I'm looking at HDR content. And this is something that I will say that TCL has done a really good job and surprisingly well. All right, so before I get into the whole comparison between the X95K and the QM8, I first want to go over the settings on the QM8 just to show an example. So the first thing that I'm playing right now is Batman vs. Superman. I wanted to pause on the scene just to show what I am experiencing with the QM8 specifically. Once again, the HDR impact is incredible on this TV, is really good. However, there is a trade-off with the QM8 by doing that HDR impact. And from what I am looking at, especially when it comes to the blooming department, you will see some black crush. Now, anytime that I tried to change the settings, it wasn't helping. It was even making it a lot worse. But I just wanted to show this portion first before I go ahead and go into the comparison. All right, so let's get into the meat and potatoes. So here's an example I got from Batman vs. Superman, just like how I was playing previously before I did a comparison. So you see the X95K on the left and you see the QM8 on the right. So excuse me for the reflection on the X95K. It's coming from the QM8, so it's nothing to do with the picture. It's just a reflection of the TV. But when looking at the Superman cape on the TCL QM8, there's some issues with Black Crush. And what does that really mean? Well, the details in the cape and the shadow parts, that's where it just almost completely disappeared. But when I try to adjust the black levels in the settings, the problem is that the blacks turns to gray and the TCL black bars, they would be completely gray. So it's no setting that you could just do some fine, a little bit of tweaks. Unlike the Sony, on the other hand, where you have multiple settings where you kind of switch it up and down to get it to your liking. But it's just one of those things that I noticed on a QM8 when it comes to the settings, that once you up the black level settings specifically, everything will start to wash out. Now, it may not show up on this camera that much, which I try to do the best I can to try to really depict it. But trust me, in person, you do notice this. And it's something that I do want to call out because there's been some talks in other videos, but I really wanted to hone in on this awareness. I know that TCL has done a really great job, especially when it comes to brightness. It has been doing a lot of like room when it comes to color and stuff, but it's just like for the blooming department, that's when they did their strongest suits, but there is a huge trade-off with that. And this is something that I noticed, especially when you look at darker movies, specifically like Batman versus Superman. I will go into some other examples later on. I'm going to be playing some Monster Hunter to give you some other examples, but especially if you were looking at a lot of dark movies, this is something that it will be very apparent. Doesn't matter how much you try to tweak the settings. But other than that, the TV is pretty good. And it's something that I just wanted just to put that awareness on. Now, when we switch over to the Sony X95K, it's a totally different story. The shadow details are good, there's no black crush at all, and everything just look more natural and refined, especially in those darker scenes. And the subtle differences in shadows and low light scenes are handled with pretty good ease, which really elevates the overall picture quality. Sony algorithm does an outstanding job processing those shadowy scenes, allowing you to see every detail without losing the depth. One of the key things to note is that I kept all the settings on default. On the X95K, I used Dolby Vision Bright, and on the TCL QM8, I switched between Dolby Vision Bright and Dolby Vision IQ. The X95K doesn't have Dolby Vision IQ, but it does offer Dolby Vision Bright and Dolby Vision Dark modes. So even though the X95K lacks the IQ, it still handles the shadows and dark scenes significantly better than the QM8, which tends to crush the blacks in similar scenes. So, where does this leave us? Well, it really depends on what you're looking for in a TV. If HDR brightness and that punchy, vibrant image are your top priorities, the TCL QM8 has you covered in a way that is hard to beat, especially considering the price. The HDR impact is simply stunning, and at the price point, it's delivering performance that feels like it belongs in a much higher tier. But if you're more focused on the shadow details and avoiding black crush, Sony will be your lineup, including the Bravia 9 in this case. It still is king in that department. The ability to retain fine details in the darker scenes is really set it apart. Sony processing power is second to none, and it handles low light content with such finesse that it's hard to find any faults when it comes to those deep, complex shadows. That said, even though you see Black Crush on the QM8 in some scenes, it's still an incredible good TV, especially for what you're paying for. Honestly, I'm shocked at just how good it is at this price point. Sony really needs to start second guess whether it's worth paying the extra premium for Sony. It's a tough call, and it really comes down to what you value more: Sony precision and refinement, or TCL incredible HDR performance and an unbeatable price. Let me know in the comments, but if you could do me a favor by hitting that like button and that subscribe button, I greatly appreciate it. Until next time, I see everyone in the next video. Take care. Bye.